The civil service have had the lowest pay award anywhere in the economy, 2%, even though inflation is at 10 and food inflation is at 16. We've tried for months to get the government to engage in discussions, and they're not even prepared to put money on the table at the moment, even though it's now been revealed that in 2 government departments alone, DWP and the tax offices, 47,000 people will get a pay rise on the 1st of April because they're now on the national minimum wage. So people who are delivering key decisions across a range of public services have had their pay cut for 10 consecutive years, now qualify for the national minimum wage. So there's a crisis of in-work poverty. 40,000 civil servants using food banks. 45,000 civil servants are claiming in-work benefits, the very definition of the in-work poor. But the government seems happy to give its own workforce far less even than everyone else has been offered and has rejected and are going on strike over. So this is necessary, I'm afraid.
Where's the money going to come from to give you any more money?
Well, we clearly think there's lots of money available, to be frank. It's a matter of political priority. The government claim it would cost, I think, 29 billion to give every public sector worker what they've asked for. Our calculations is actually would cost nearer 10 billion if you take into account the tax and insurance that is paid. And 10 billion pounds in an economy like ours can easily be found. And we know that this government, in the form of Liz Truss, a Conservative government, was prepared to borrow £200 billion for tax cuts. So it's a matter of if they prioritise paramedics, job centre workers and border force staff, or they're happy to see those people claim benefits and use food banks.
This is a list of what you're looking for from the government. I suppose the Chancellor and thus the Prime Minister would say to you in response, we cannot do this because it will fuel inflation.
Well, I don't think any serious economist believes that the current inflation has anything to do with pay. And our view is the Bank of England is trying to cut the inflation target, but the Bank of England is also worried about a recession. We narrowly missed a recession last time. Most people accept that if you're going into a recession, the last thing you want is for people to be impoverished and have no money to spend. We need people to be able to support the hospitality sector, the manufacturing sector. And if PCS members were to get a pay rise, I can say to UK, they would not be putting it in the Cayman Islands or tax-free investments. They would spend it because people are desperate. And in our view, that has a boosting effect on the economy, and it is something that could easily be afforded and economically would be a wise thing to do.
Which departments, how will my viewers at home this morning be affected?
Well, there'll be a lot of effects today. It's a one-day strike, so job centres will be closed today. There's already picket lines at our airports and our ports. Museums and galleries will be closed. Passport offices will be closed. The Driving and Vehicle Licence Agency will be closed. The Welsh Parliament, for example, can't sit today. The Scottish Parliament will be seriously disrupted. So across all parts of government life, there will be picket lines today and there will be no public service. And that's for one day. But we've also announced that because this can't just be about a protest, there's going to be a week of strike action at the British Museum. There's going to be 4 days of strikes at the borders, including Dover and Calais and Dunkirk. And that's going to involve significant disruption. So our message to the government is rather than just duck this, rather than accept all this disruption, you must accept there is an economic and moral case to say we cannot have civil servants claiming the benefits they administer, visiting food banks and being on the national minimum wage.
It looks as though, certainly from what we heard from the Education Secretary this morning, they're not going to budge. They're not going to budge. Do you anticipate another day of action when 500,000 workers will be on strike?
I anticipate there'll be more than that the next time I think there's a day of action because the government's position is unsustainable. Now, let's be clear, they do U-turns at a pretty rapid rate. We've seen Rishi Sunak do a number of U-turns. It's not feasible that they can sit back with this unprecedented amount of industrial action growing because it's 500,000 today. Next week we have paramedics and we have nurses. There will then be the firefighters we know have now voted for strike action. So the amount of people taking or voting for action is going to grow. And I don't believe the government will find it can get away with putting its head down while all this disruption takes place. And I think they'll be forced to take a much more realistic attitude. But if they refuse, we are planning for our campaign to continue right through the summer with both long-term sustained targeted strikes, but also mass actions like today. And I think we will see, if there is another one, it will be even bigger than the one today.
And when do you anticipate that might happen?
Well, there's strikes next week, as we know. We know that the teachers' unions, for example, have announced 2 days of strike action in March. One of those days is on budget day. And I think it would be a fair guess to say that lots of unions will be looking to see whether that is a really good time for us to come back together. But that's a long time away, Kay. And if Richie Sunak is watching your programme, or Jeremy Hunt...
Well, they both do. Good morning.
I think they need to realise that they can't get away with this. They cannot have this in-work poverty in this country at this level, and they cannot have the disruption that we're seeing. And they're going to have to do something about it, and the sooner they get on and do that, the better.
So just to clarify, you're saying that if the government doesn't come back with more money, an offer of a decent amount of money, in your opinion, then in 6 weeks' time we will see more than 500,000 workers on strike all on the same day?
I'm saying that if the government refuses to improve any offers and doesn't put money on the table, there will be more and more strikes. And given we already know that the teachers have already announced a 2-day strike in the 15th and 16th of March, I think it's very likely that other unions may well take the same decision. Our union's National Executive Committee will meet next week, and we will take a decision on future action, and that will be one of the things that we'll be discussing.
What do you need? What can the government do in order to stop that?
Money now. We cannot have a situation where they tell us you just have to wait. I mean, our 2023 pay, which they tell us to wait for, in some cases isn't due till August. I mean, to be honest, the energy bills are going up in April. The crisis is now, and we need money now, and we've made that absolutely clear. But we also need in the civil service an agreement. They're not going to cut the tens of thousands of jobs they're threatening to cut. They're not going to cut our members' redundancy terms, Kay, by a staggering 33% is the cuts they want to make. They want to make tens of thousands redundant and cut their contractual redundancy by a third. And also yesterday we were in the High Court because they know that our pensions are currently unfair and we're paying too much for our pensions despite an independent public sector valuation. So in short, treat us with the dignity and respect we deserve. We were clapped in the pandemic. Now give us money to avert this crisis.
Okay, 30 seconds to our fair. One final word for Jacob Rees-Mogg, who said we don't need this many civil servants.
What we don't need is Jacob Rees-Mogg.